Hi, I'm Seamless, and today is Wednesday, which means it's time for a new viewer track review video. If you would like your track to be reviewed, you can head on over to the Discord and use the submissions channels that are in there. There are also the rules that are there to help you, to help me make things easier for myself, which is mostly just so I have your name and the song name and that kind of thing. Other people have suggested that I also include a parameter for like what link a person would like to show off, like if you have a SoundCloud or if you prefer something else, that kind of thing. Not everybody has one. Not everybody is ready to have one. So it might be a thing. We will think about that though. Anywho, this first track is called Sanctuary by Pigeonchild. And it says it's mastered, and it also says that this is a WAV file. I'm pointing that out because so far everything we've learned about what MP3s do to things makes this an interesting result, doesn't it? So, let's have a listen to this. I have no idea what this is.
Pigeonchild.
Well, that was super hardcore. I dig this style a lot. When I came from metal, like when I was doing metal, in the beginning, I had no taste for the kind of like harsh vocals, like screamy, yelly things. I did eventually acquire it, and now I do actually enjoy it. And this is nice, the way that those vocals are in there. Is there just like a really hard low pass on everything in like a linear phase fashion? Because I didn't really hear any detriment for the fact that there was this. I'm just curious as to the choice. As a method for completely avoiding the MP3 destruction, I can see that. I can see that being a thing. I would, however, suggest that you just roll off on it instead of it being just as hard as this is. That's really hard. But that is 15K and higher, and the majority of humans on Earth can't hear that high. So, is it actually a problem? No one knows. Anything else about this? I like the whoopie doops on the bass here. Like, this kind of like extremely harsh low end is usually a bad kind of mix call, because you can plainly see that like there's competition in the sub just for the other sub. Like harmonics are just as loud, but it doesn't really matter if the track is sparse enough to live through that. And again, the high frequency cut up there probably saved a bit on some harshness. I wonder. Good job though, Pigeonchild. I dug the track. I can't think of anything terribly like wrong or like bad to say about this, other than just the cut is really confusing me. Is really the moral of the story here, because you would normally see a wave file and not see that. Is sort of my thought. Are you gonna release this? Did someone ask you to do this? So many questions. I hope there's a discussion in the comments about this, because I'm curious now. Anyway. Let's move on to the next track. MDEC, MDEC. Technetium, or Technetium, one of those. See, this one is also a wave file. And this is more like what I was expecting, like going all the way up kind of thing. So, let's see how this one sounds. Wow, that was a trip. Okay, I like this a lot. I love this kind of like breaky, noisy stuff. And my biggest complaint about this is that there is no sub definition. There's plenty of sub, there's plenty of bass going on, but not a lot of like, there's not like a note. And I think that's on top of, I guess this is unmastered. Well, it's a whip, of course. Ignoring the part where it says whip. Okay, so when you master this, you might discover that how gnarly this sub is going to be your biggest problem. And then perhaps another problem you'll have is all this DC offset going on. Come on. There we go. This stuff. When you see these like extremely low frequencies that just kind of linger, that is more or less what DC offset looks like. When you see what DC offset is when instead of the zero plane being actually at zero, it has level, as though you're using FL's voltage control output, which actually does just put out flat plane of unoscillating level, and the control hardware or whatever. If you were to look at that signal, what you'd see is like a frequency just kind of pew, and it just goes way down, and it's just down, it's far, real far down. The reason why that happens is because a DC offset is technically like an eternally long oscillation. It's an oscillation that started and went up high and has yet to come down. So the longer that it's up there, the lower frequency it could potentially be if it were to actually oscillate. The things that tend to do this kind of stuff are when you overly distort some things and asymmetrically, and certain sounds and beats and boofs that makes DC offset happen. And also on like high frequency stuff, if you do lots of high frequency FM and distortion, it creates a rhythmic aspect of it that it would probably be inaudible if it were like a bass, but because it's so high frequency, it's a bass. That's how fast it is now. And this is a big reason why high passing everything is a kind of a high priority when it comes to mixing stuff, because regardless of how cool it sounds, it probably generated some noise that didn't need to be in there. You can see like it's not happening over here, so there's something else happening. on like in here and these sounds that are in here that are contributing to that. So if you're, depending on how clean you want it to sound, because given that this was a trip, a cacophonous trip, it probably doesn't matter how well like clean it is if that's not really the goal. But if it could be, then separate the subs, high pass everything. When you smash it all together, compression, I believe you'll find your life a lot easier. Other than that, pretty cool. Like I do a little think that the way this progression went is kind of cliche. Like, what the heck, cliche in this context? Because sure, noisy, shenanigan, industrial heaviness kind of thing with weird cacophonic. I'm just inventing so many words today. Sort of atonalness in music. That's the cliche right there, which is not necessarily bad. But if that's not the focus, it doesn't really need to be. And although this is the outro, and most people don't last this long to get into the song, but it probably didn't need to be that long. Or if you're gonna go nuts on it, I just gnarl it up, gnarls it out there. And wow, look at that really high frequency tail up there. What is that? Can't even hear it, but it's up there. I love looking at stuff in this. Oh, so someone else also commented about how having this guy here is basically the same information as having this guy. And there is actually a reason I have this. And it's mostly if you're an FL producer that this is valuable. Because, while it's true that this gives you a more complete view of what's happening like overall, when it eventually becomes time for you to try this yourself, you're going to look at it in here. You're going to see it in the EQ, and it really pays to know what this looks like in like this view of things. So that when you're going to go do it yourself, like you don't have to load it up into this and verify. You can just know. That's why I tend to look at both, so that I know what like I can make some logical answers and questions on things, and then B, I can see how it looks in the actual tool that I'm going to use to try and do it. Anywho, this is a decent whip. I'm curious to see how this one goes. Good job, MDEC. Next one is Simo Redemption Glitch Hop VIP Mix Demo 11 in depth. So this person actually commented on the upload and told me to go really hard on the mix, to not hold back, to rip it to shreds. So I'm going to go full seamless on this and absolutely talk about some details that probably aren't anywhere near as important to other people. But you asked for it, so let's hear what this sounds like. Fun. All right, so mix. Well, okay, so I like this a lot. This actually kind of sounds like a song that'd be in like Adventure Time or Steven Universe, only hard enough to actually be played out instead of tiny and toy sounding. And it's got a lot of that whimsical nature to it. And I only just figured out some of my problems with it by the time it got out here and we could finally hear some of these instruments by themselves. And the biggest one is just the competition of your layers in here is a lot. Some of these elements, some of these sounds are like as loud as the percussion are by themselves, which makes the percussion feel quite not as powerful when they come on. Although, I will say, how tight your sidechain is pretty impressive. Like when this stuff happens and it doesn't just wreck a thing, like that's pretty great. And especially when like stuff like this happens and like you can very plainly see stuff, like even it's still there. It's really impressive mix-wise. However, some of the things suffer for some choices, like the layering being this loud, I think is causing how hard you had to go for this. Like at the end here, and I was going to say some things about compression timing, and then it made sense as to why some things were as slow as they were, because you probably felt and heard a little bit when you got around here how it got kind of distorty. Which, of course, happens to me all the time when I do my kind of compression really hard and all very deep, and then I try and go dark on some things, and all of a sudden it's like, you still want high frequency content? Here's your high frequency content. And you fix that by controlling your release times and things to be slow enough so that it doesn't distort when these things happen. And then you bring them back up for the rest of the time. And let's talk about the rest of the time. You can quite see that there's a pretty nice, like, even distribution of where the sub is, and it's quite high. Your key that you're in is pretty well an octave higher than a normal way that this is distributed, but you also play the low enough notes. Like your progression does go down there, and so I can see why you'd be that high. For being that high, though, it is a lot faster than if you were not. And by faster, I mean the oscillations. The oscillations of all this stuff are fast enough that you probably want faster compression time. Normally, this is where I talk about automating the compression time, but I actually don't think you should do that for this track, unless you already are, in which case keep working with it because it's part of why it works out so well. But what I mean by that is because of how homogeneous all the stuff is all together, there probably is just a setting that works well enough on top of how tight sidechaining is happening on stuff like this. It's all added together in such a way that like it has its presence and its way of being the whole time. Unfortunately, that's how it's happening is like things like this vocal chop are very loud, and things like the background string element is also as loud. And I feel like this is I give this advice sometimes. I say, okay, you want a lot of the stuff to sound together as awesome as they all did individually. And that is true, but some of those things individually need reinforcement that's not necessarily designed to be heard by itself. Like big white noise that's on top of stuff that flows up and down. That's not really meant to be heard by itself. There's not like a dopeness for it by itself for it to be heard there, but it needs to be there in order to accentuate the things that it's designed to accentuate. Not saying you need noise. I'm just saying that's one example of a thing that is more, it really is only useful as a background, and it's there to make the other stuff sound cooler. And some of the stuff absolutely is that kind of content that didn't need to be this loud. And for the stuff that was, I would recommend just high passing a little bit higher, or at least rolling off a little higher. Like you might be able to still have these frequencies there where they are, but you can like roll off up to here on them so that they aren't brighter. And I'm using that term because it's literally that in this case, but it just means louder. They don't need to be as loud as your percussive elements. Especially because when I hear glitch chop, when I hear this sort of thing, I, of course, immediately think of Cohen sound. And that is basically my mix reference for these things. And the thing that they did that impressed me so much when they were brand new in my world was just how hard their kicks and snares were as just as a mixed concept. Of course, the sounds were all very well and cool, but it's a relativity thing. The sounds were dope, but the levels of it were as such that when the kick and snare happened, it was evidently power versus it as loud as the rest of it. Like, those are some poppin' happening. I get that there's things that are actually that low down there happening, but like your pluck chord and this thing and your voice are all the kind of loud together that they probably didn't need to be, is all. So that when the kicks and snare come on, like it doesn't so much feel like a louder, now here's the drums happening, it just kind of feels like here's more stuff, more of that stuff that's occurring. Then we have the compression timing problem, which is more exacerbated when like the stuff's by itself. You can sort of, and actually what we were just talking about or a better moment for this, like right here. You can really hear it kind of happening. And we were just talking about the DC offset and why a DC offset appears as a lower frequency the longer it exists. And with the distortion stuff that we were talking about before in lots of previous videos, where we look at like what these guys are doing sample-wise, if a sample interacts with the line up here, it just becomes a flat line. The longer that flat line is will determine the frequency to which the snap goes. So it can snap, a little bit, or it can snap all the way down. And what determines whether or not it will do that, like how far down the distorted snap goes, is just how long the distortion lasted. Because if it is equal to the wavelength of a lower frequency waveform, then that's how far down the snap goes. So, the moral of the story is that this is actually true for compression as well. The more it interacts with the limit, the deeper and harder it has to move it, the farther down in frequency that whippy thing starts to affect stuff. So if you wanted the whippy kind of overcompressed sound to only affect the higher frequency stuff, then it has to be a less of an interaction in the limit, or a faster one, so that it spends less time doing it. That is the issue of this track being so low, or rather so high frequency, because now how low is too low is now higher than it was if this were a lower keyed song, which means that you would want to up how fast your compression is, timing wise. Yay, we got there. Also, you only want me to comment on mixing stuff, so I guess I don't really have anything to say about the arrangement. You seem to know what you want out of it, which is good insofar as like having a direction, because it is very well defined what it is. I just think it gets a little long in the tooth, especially like at this range, because there are some different and cool things that happen down here, but it's still just mostly this. And I guess if you have this kind of running on in the background elements of stuff, you would probably be fine with that. This is one of these things that's just so complicated that you could probably hear it do the same thing twice and you'd find new things to have heard about it. So, dope track is dope. And that was as far down I could rip into it mix-wise. All right. This track is called Vertical by Dubswitcher. So this person tells me that everything in here is FL stock. And not only that, but all of the sounds except for the drums are self-designed, including the guitar. I have actually no idea what this song sounds like, but I am intrigued. So, let us hear. Thanks. Thank you. Come on. That was awesome. Man, you guys remember when these sounds were like the holy grail that no one could do? And now here they are, just beautiful, awesome. I like the song a lot. And what guitar? Was there a guitar in this track? Did I mix that up with someone else's track? I don't know. Are we describing the lead as a guitar? This is a nice sound. Kind of weird that I don't recall there being a guitar having just heard this, but whatever. This is an example of pretty much every good mixing decision I just described about old stuff. Like, you can kind of see it happening here. And you can also kind of see that there's harmony going on because here's the cut going. But the thing that we're looking at is that we can plainly see that there's this sort of idea of this sound present, and then there's sort of this lower, quieter thing behind it, and this other kind of harmonic thing on top of both. Now, when we look at the stack right here, we can see all of them together. Well, what is important to note is that whatever's happening here isn't just a product of whatever one thing we can hear that we're paying attention to. It's all of it all together. And they would not sound that way if they were not all together in this exact way with this level. And it was especially cool seeing it come up during one of the build-ups. Where'd it go? Was it this guy? It was this guy. And you can see the layers kind of increasing beneath it. And that's just, that's a bit different than if we were having all of it on all at once the whole time. Yeah. I was also going to say about this kick. And the levels of it are pretty well perfect. This is what I kind of expect out of a low-end mix. Is like, cool, really loud kick and like still kind of loud, but not as loud sub. So that dynamic range of there being the different levels of kick and sub is quite like clear and noticeable. And you also can see fun stuff happen, like, you know, when they all move around or whatever, that like, it's cool that sometimes it can be real present, but because of this, like the sidechaining, obviously it works out to fit in nicely. It's real cool to see that, especially cool to see like all this like pitch action moving around. I was looking at this in the beginning, like this was a fun moment. I dug it. But yeah, the kick. So there's a kind of doofy quality to it. I use that word a lot, and it's not really a bad thing. Like it's not, it's just what the onomatopoeia of the feeling is to me. And the thought is that this kick hit is nice there, but then like this amount of frequency is just a little too loud. And actually you can kind of see it happening like all kind of there too. And this sort of thing is, I honestly just will put a tiny little EQ notch like right there, just kind of so that this, like, you get the low weight of it, but you don't really get that hot kind of punch tone overdone. Although I will say this felt awesome as like an electro-y kind of party experience full of awesome sounds. This is just like the coolest thing. And to have done it all with FL stock, I can tell you from experience, is no easy task. And the just execution of it is basically flawless. So good job there. I also, though, MP3. This is an MP3 and it's clipping. I do see that it does go quite a bit up there in that regard, and I'm sort of confused as to what parts of this are continuing to do that. But it doesn't affect the tone in any kind of bad way. Like I enjoy the kind of like this area focus on how the tone is. You can kind of see this like big kind of hole up the top here, but there's basically a big peak and another big peak. It's not that big, but that gives us that nice spread out feeling when the big guys hit. Like that kind of like part of that feeling that way is about how spread out it is, and how as opposed to it being like perfectly harmonically defined in a tone. That's giving us that like washed out texture, plus the extra stuff that we can do with it to make it kind of bring in the bite that also is present in it. Pretty well see it and tell which ones it is because it's there. And you could see the very faint idea of what the filter was that caused the tone to exist, and there it goes moving around through it. And yeah, just presents perfectly nicely. I dig this track. Good job with it. I can't really think of much about what more I would high pass out of it. There wasn't actually all that much happening. There's the kick and the snares and the hats and that kit with it. There's those main basses, and then there's that lead line. And what guitar? Was there a background guitar that I just was ignoring? Neat. Anyway, good job, Senor Dubswitcher. This next track is Evilfaic, F-A-I-C, Solid Ground. Let's see what this sounds like. Oh, whoa, that's a fun pattern. Okay. Hit the stop button, hit the play button. That was interesting. Now I know why that pattern looked like that. So, this track, also fire. It was pretty the same kind of fire as that previous one, and that was totally unplanned on my part. But, those are butts. Okay, actually, pretty okay butts. So, in the last one where we could sort of see where the hot was on the hot and the top and sort of also here, this one being smiley as it is, being the weight of the hang here, this is a lot more fatiguing than the other guy. And this has to do with kind of like a relative loudness thing. Because, yeah, we want this to hit and nice and burn and that kind of thing. But if we were to lower this guy and then kind of raise this range, it would more or less feel like this. It would actually feel and hit burn just about as big up there, but it wouldn't literally hurt you to listen to it. So you hear me joke a lot about like, okay, cool, this track is fine. Whatever you're doing is fine. It doesn't hurt to listen to. It sounds good, it's good. This actually is kind of getting to that range of like, now it's starting to hurt. And, those big organy distorted chords are going to do that because that's a lot of high frequency and you distort the chords, you're going to get a lot more high frequency and the presence is just going to be astronomical. This track also had a bit of an issue with some of those chords equaling up to some interesting cancellation. And no chords present. Where's them? Yeah, like... Part of the problem with distorting chords is that the same mix problem you have of like playing a low chord suddenly also happens when you play a little bit higher chords because the phase cancellation and the distortion on top of it will create lower frequencies that you either need to high pass or will just do that to your sound. And that's why you have to care actually about your voicing now because the math of the notes you choose can impact how smooth your output is. I think you might notice in some deadmau5 tracks that do this kind of thing that they kind of, the voices stick to pretty predictable outcomes when it comes to distortion and things like that. My recommendation for tackling this kind of thing nowadays would actually be to integrate lots of mid-side approaches. Part of the presence thing is that if you distort side stuff and the high frequency side stuff, especially, that it'll kind of get your head in there a little harder and do that fatiguing nonsense. But if you say distort only the mid but keep the side smooth, then that helps to have the presence without having the burn, but still feel like you do. That's the magic. That's what like a lot of the tricks are for, is to still be this hard in a result, but not in a way that like is the hard result on our heads. But, and so far as pushing something hot, this was awesome. This was pretty well an incredible example of this. Like the only real complaint I have is that it was essentially too awesome. Like in terms of just how hard the burn is. Like the sub is good, the low end punch is all right. I would do some different things about the drums, but mostly because the drums aren't loud enough versus the high frequency content. You can see it up here. The hits, but it doesn't compete. And the competition is still like the extra burning. And by the time we get somewhere like this, the impact of doing that half-timey stuff is a little lost when the puncture can't punch through how hard and bright your brights are. But that's just kind of up to you about like what is it you want to accentuate on and that kind of thing. I would maybe open up a little bit, or maybe even do like a special sidechain on just the high frequency stuff so that it kind of punches out a little longer, like it has just a little longer of a release tail on it, versus the rest of the stuff is good. Like the way that it hits pretty much from like what is this? Like 5K, 2K, 5K down is aight. It's just that above that, it's hot. So cool. Good job, Evilfaic. This track is called Sing Me to Sleep by Black Demons. Let's see what this one's like. Watch it be another one of those electric tracks. I'm not complaining. Okay. This was a brave choice to make a song this low. And okay. I don't know if you guys knew this, and it's not to say that all songs should be created with caring about playing out on stage and big sound systems or whatever, but those big systems don't actually go very low in terms of their frequency response. In fact, plenty of them top out at like 50 hertz, or bottom out rather, unless a place has like for real high power, all amazing ultra bass. Then, and fun fact about that, a lot of that is actually just straight up not allowed in residential or populated or any kind of areas whatsoever. And one of the big reasons why raves and things, other than the drug culture that got pushed on the ground, is because literally buildings would be destroyed by how loud and how deep the bass is. So that's pretty well why, that you're either not going to find a place or you have to go really weird places to find somewhere that has actually a big system that goes that low. As a result, a lot about what this track is would just be lost on a system like that, playing it at like C sharp or whatever this is. And the other thing about it is that a lot of your fill elements in this track have better, harder, bassier punch than the actual bass does. And especially in this first guy. The first time they actually go down into that, it doesn't match. It doesn't match the intensity that led into it. And it would absolutely not. And like part of the reason it's not for me right now is because I don't have the bass response to hear that. I'd have to stand up and walk it back a couple of feet to let the bass terminate to be able to feel that. And I bet you I would. I bet you if I did that, it would actually match and feel pretty awesome. So, like, if your goal is to just let the bass life be that way and not necessarily play it out, then nothing I say matters about it. It's awesome. It's dope. Good job. I actually like a lot about it. I like the lead element, although, this, you should high pass it a little bit more, I would say. And maybe not a lot, like all the like cut high pass, but just roll off on it, because some of that energy is interfering with some of the elements that it probably shouldn't interfere with. Oh yeah, and what? That, okay. I'm not saying don't do a breakbeat, because I love breakbeats, and everything can use breakbeats, but you have to use a better breakbeat. That sounded like one of the FPC kits, and they're fine, they can be used, but they take work, and some of that work is, for example, not doing the da-da-da-da at the same level as the main hit, like boof, baf, baf-a-boof, baf. The baf-a-boof is a experience in leveling, where you do like, here's the first hit, it's low level, here's the next one, it's high level, here's the first one, it's low level, here's the next one, it's high level, and it's to sort of act like a drummer. And you need to do that for breakbeat, because all that we know about breakbeats is from hearing old funk drummers on actual drum kits playing for real drums. And when you don't do that, it just sounds like notes, and it doesn't really fit the feel. And this whole section just doesn't match with the rest of the track doing its thing. There could be another element, there could be a bridge that you should put in there, but the break concept doesn't go as well as cool as this regular beat is. Like, the regular beat is pretty fire. I'm using that word a lot, but it is. And this just took me out of it. It could be worked to make it make sense, in my opinion. I honestly think it would be easier to can it and to try and put another element in there to do that. Or different kind of drum setting, or maybe a different line, or change a key, a bunch of options. But like, it has to be on the level of the stuff that's around it, and that one was not. So yeah, I get that this is a little lullaby-y, right? Like, that's sort of the thought. This is real dark and real low and real high powered for how dark and how low it is. I would air it up. I would try I'd layer it with like something kind of tinny and airy on top, like low level, or like some noise, some more reverb that's not so much on, like, I'll release time on just these harmonics, because they do, like, this octave-y feel gets to me after a while. Like, just hearing that one extra thing for a second. Like, that guy gave me the harmonic, like, yeah, finally, of like the high frequencies that I wanted, because this thing is just so very dark in there. I can kind of see the point of that. It's like you had your hats and stuff up top, and plus also that lead thing, the other guy. And I liked it how it talked near the end, like. And there's that element again that is just more than what your track is in terms of how like of heaviness, and it's mostly just because it's up in a range that you can hear it, versus the bass that is like not powerful enough for how low it is. And of course, if you did turn it up to be powerful enough, it'd be so much level as to just destroy everything else, which is what I said about it just being a brave choice to make a track this low. Because it's not impossible, it's just really hard. So, decent job overall. This next track is made by Acid, I guess, and this track is called Type A001 to MP3. Let's see what it sounds like. Ooh, already. All right. It really seems like the theme of the day today is people are way too loud in the high frequencies. This guy, oh boy, like I was listening to this and I was just like, that's a lot. It's so loud. It peaks so high relative to everything else. And then this dude happened, and I had to turn the monitor down. I already had the monitor down pretty low, but then I could start to hear my ears burn. So let's talk about how you can detect when a thing is ear fatiguing, right? Like, obviously when you're jamming to a track and you're not paying attention, like, you don't care. But like, if you're actually trying to sit down and be like, is this good or bad? How do you know? Let's talk about how we know. You can feel it. That burning sensation that I just mentioned, that's a real feeling. That's not just like, yo, this burns. It's like, if you can hear a thing and you can start to feel your ears get hot. Like, it's a sensation. I don't actually know if the temperature is actually increasing or not, but that's what it feels like. And that's how you know you're hearing stuff that's way too loud in their high frequencies. And the that's what I got when this thing started happening. It wasn't the perception that it was actually all that much louder. It was that I could start to feel my ears. And that's when I was like, oh God, if there were a dog around, it's not a terribly high frequency, but I have to imagine it would stress them out. But and then at the end, for how dark everything else was, the presence of it really accentuated how loud it was. So let's talk about the rest of everything else, because I like it. I like acid a lot. I like the beats. This is very like cyberpunky, like res style kind of thing. And that worked out. You did it. Like, other than that, how loud these guys are. And especially this dude, because he was so in that range there. Like, there was extra high frequency. I mean, you wanted to make room for the hats, and you did. And as tight and as far as this was, there was a too tight and too far to go. I will also say that I would recommend a bit of progression. I've done a little bit of this, like, 303E kind of acid stuff in the past, and my instinct is usually to do this, to do some kind of like dark, kind of fun riff, right? But then, like, around the third or fourth time you do it, just change the key. Just change the key every 4 bars, keep the same progression, like up and down, and it freshens it right up. You could also just keep going like this, because this is more or less the style, and people who listen to it are more or less going to expect it. So it's not as if you're disappointing anybody. It just could be better. Could be doper. This probably could be pushed a little harder too, in terms of like actual literal loudness and stuff. I was just about to say that this would work out decently as a background element, except for how loud this high frequency stuff is, because it is just astronomical. And this is where I start to question either a person's hearing damage or their listening environment, for if they're overcompensating for something. Like, just playing that just now in my head. Woof. Okay. I will play one more track for today. This is GAT. Please clap. Okay, so they did explain in their comment that the drop originally had a vocal sample here, and it was crap, I already forget the politician that did this, but it was at a rally or something, and then like they actually asked, please clap or something like that. Like, I remember that being the thing. I don't remember how it actually went, but they took it out of there because they were worried about violating the copyrighted samples policy that I have about my uploads, and about basically trying not to have something that they can see. And I actually think something like that might be like publicly available, like if considered to be like public, if you do that. I don't actually know though, because some asshole news organization might try to claim and be like, no, that was our footage. So I appreciate your better safe than sorry attitude. But do just know there's supposed to be like an actual vocal there. I assume that was a drop. I'm guessing. Let's have a thought. Okay, well, this was pretty much playing it safe to track. It pretty well handled a lot of the same problems that we were just describing from the previous tracks about how high and how loud, and also how low you decided to be. And also had some funky and fun solutions to those problems. So, the big one about these hats, because it pretty much is the same kind of like hat distribution. Like there's a really high one, a really low one. But look at the levels distribution up here. Like there's a peak of how low that sub is, and the highs do not reach it. They don't. They're up there, and this track is this is a kind of a dark style, and that's what darkness looks like. It looks dark. And the result of this is that like it still feels present because the high frequency stuff doesn't need to sound as loud as low frequency stuff. Like in reality, to our ears, this pretty much sounds flat. This is this distribution of weight. The rest of like the other more popular ways of like the smile EQing, where it's like there's a big hole, there's high frequencies, and then there's low frequencies, is an accentuation on things to make things feel hotter. And like in terms of like flatness, this is more or less what flatness looks like. But let's talk about this fun bit, right? Because you can see plainly where the harmonic pressure is. But it clearly is a low note, or at least there's a low note oscillation going on. How would that be done? A couple of ways. This is probably some form of ring modulation or whatever, or it's just another waveform is down there and it's just EQ'd, it's just high passed, and its result is still gonna oscillate like this. It's still going to do that, even if it's just a higher harmonics, but it doesn't have to have the low sub power that's actually at that note. I would have done this by ring modulating like a sub inside Citrus, but this could have just been a layered low pass, high pass, banded up style wave on top of a sub. And the result of it is that like the sub is where the sub is in a regular life, like we're around the kick, but it still sounds like it's an octave lower. And we still get that like beef feel, that like, oh, this is just dangerously low kind of feeling, without it literally being like that, without imparting the levels problem that you would normally get from that kind of thing. And this is an excellent solution to that. I assume these sound effecty things are claps, and that's kind of funny. This would be, I like it. I like this the way that it is, basically. And with that sample there, it would make sense and be funny. So I dig it. Good job, individual GAT. So that's it for this week. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check out the Discord if you'd like to submit a track to be reviewed. And as usual, have a nice day.